Hey guys, what's going on? It's Matt, Trainer of 943. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to modify your Lionel subway cars. This is the R27 set from Lionel. They're the scale subways that they made back in 2008. And I'm going to show you how to put LED lights in them, and I'm also going to throw in some figures into the cars here. Now, I've done two of them already, and I'll show you what they look like. So right here, what you're looking at, this is a unmodified car. So this is how it looks from the factory. So if I open the doors here, you can see that's our interior, and the bulbs that are in it are just incandescent lights. So if I go ahead and roll it backwards here, you'll be able to see my LED'd car. Move forward a little bit more. There we go. Alright, so let me open the doors here. You can see that's our interior with LEDs. And now if I roll it back one more time, you'll be able to see the interior with the people. Alright, here we go. So yeah, you can see it looks really cool. I'll do some close-up shots in a second so you guys can see. So we'll go ahead and do some close-ups, and then we'll pull the next car in the chain down, and we'll go ahead and LED it and throw the people in. So let's take some close-up shots here. Alright, just so you guys can see a little bit better, this is the interior stock, and you can see we got the floor and the seats, but again, no people. So let's take a look at my interior with the LEDs a little bit closer. Alright, so here's a better look at the interior with the LEDs, and as you guys can see, there's quite a bit of difference, and I think it looks a lot more realistic this way. So I'll go and show you the people now. Alright, and here's a little bit better look at the interior with the people, and let me pan the camera over here. So you can see, I got some more people back over here. And it looks really cool. So, like I said, I'll go ahead and pull one of these cars off the bench, the next car in the line here, and we will convert it and throw some people in there, make it look more realistic. So here we go. Alright, so I got a whole bunch of materials here, and I'll go ahead and show you what we got here. So start off with a screwdriver, and this is used to open up the car. It's also a magnetic screwdriver, which is very helpful, and it's a small screwdriver because the screws for the car are very small, and also the screws for the light PCBs are very tiny. So I have one that will accommodate both, which is kind of nice. We have a pair of tweezers here. These are helpful for when we're working with the LED, because when we cut it down, it's going to be very tiny, and I like to hold it with the tweezers. Have a pair of neo-nose pliers here, a pair of wire cutters, have an ohm meter here, which we'll get to in a while, and that's an optional thing. You don't really need it, but I happen to use it every now and then, so that's why I have it. It's always good to have it. So then we have the resistor and the LED itself. Then we also have a pair of alligator clips here, and these and this are kind of optional. I like to use it just to check my work, because you'll find that after we get this all done, the last thing you'll want to do is have to open up the car a million times to fix something. So I always like to check my work before I put the car back together. And then for the passengers, we also have some glue, and then over here I have some passengers. You can see we got some over here. So we'll start with the passengers first, because what we can do is we can set the frame aside and work on the LEDs while the glue's drying. So alright, without any further ado, let's get going here. Alright, so we're going to open up the car. So I have my little screwdriver here, and we're going to go ahead and take the screws out. Now there's 4 screws on this car. There's 2 next to each truck, and then over here I have a little screw ball that I'm putting the screws into, which it helps me keep track of them so I don't lose them. Alright, so now we're going to open up the car here. So what you want to do is, on one of these ends there's a slot that has a PCB sled in it, So you want to be kind of careful with that. So you want to kind of just lift it up on the one side and then come over here on the other side. It's hard to do kind of one-handed here, but basically you just want to pull it up like that. There we go. And then the frame will come off. It's on the side, the little PCB connection up there. Alright, so now what we can do is we can set the shell aside for a minute and focus on the interior, and I'll go ahead and add the people in here. So here we go. Alright, so I've got a small assortment of figures here. Now it's not enough to fill the whole car, but what I've been doing is I've been kind of putting some figures in, and then as time went on I added some more. So go ahead and do it here. Now I got some Elmer's glue here. Now you can use whatever you want. Actually, in this video description here I'll link a video done by Train Room Gary, and he did a bunch of different glue tests with all different glues for these people here. So you know, you could do whatever you want, really makes no difference. So just throw some glue on there and I'll go ahead and place it. Doesn't really matter where you place it wherever you like. So we'll start right there and then we'll just keep on going. Alright, so I've put the figures in, and you know, like I said, it's starting to look pretty good. It looks a whole lot better than it did before we even started. So just with this modification alone, it looks even better. So we'll go ahead and set the frame aside and we'll grab the shell and we'll start working on the LEDs. Alright, so forgive me as I can't really get this whole thing in the shot here, but basically what we're after is we want to get rid of the light bulbs that are in here. So let me show you. One right there, as you can see. We've got one hiding underneath this wire connector. We've got one hiding underneath this set of wire connectors. Then we have one over here. So what we're going to start off by doing is we're going to remove these PCBs. Now you might be saying why. Well, it'll make a whole lot more sense when we get it out and start working on it, because unless you want to go in there and you have really good soldering skills and can work in that really confined space, I personally can't, but if you can, be my guest. But it's a whole lot easier to pull them out and just work on them just on the towel over here. So I'm going to pull these out. There's, on this side, which is the one we'll start with, there's 3 screws. There's one here, here, and then there's one way in the back. So I'll go ahead and pull those out here. Like I said, they're in there. Now, and this really is where the magnetized screwdriver really comes in handy, because these screws are extremely tiny. I mean, just to give you guys an idea, that's the screw. Really tiny. Alright, so you can see I still have the PCB in the car, and there's a reason for it. Is right here, there's a wire Molex plug, and this is another thing that I have to take out because it's royal pain when you get over to the bulb over there. To solder it and not destroy that plug is a real challenge, at least for me. So I don't want to burn it. So what you do is you come in here and you just remove the plug. There we go, like that. So then now we can come back in here and take out this last screw, and then we'll get to work. Alright, so I've removed all the screws and the little wire connector, and again, you don't have to remove this, but I do just because it's easier. So we're going to use the screwdriver one more time, because getting this PCB out of here sometimes is a little difficult and needs some help. At least I do anyway. So alright, so here we are. So we'll set this aside because we won't need it for a while, and we'll focus on this. So here we go. Alright, so here's the board out of the car, and we'll go ahead and examine it a little bit for just a second. So we have right now 2 bulbs. We have one here, and we have one on the other end. And you can see in here there's a spot for a third one. Why Lionel didn't put one in, I have no idea. But when I LED these cars here, so far I've done 3. I've done one here, one on the end, and then one in the middle. So basically what we do is we have the LED and of course the resistor. I'm just going to demonstrate with the LED here real quick. So what I do is you go on the square part of the circle here, so this squared off part. That's the positive end. And then what you do is you take the little prongs here, you put them through, and then what you'll do is you'll go ahead and I like to bend them down. Obviously the resistor will be in here as well, so it'll be the end of this will be the end of the resistor, and you just solder these little pads on here, and that's it. So we'll start with this one first, just because this one is something that, again, it's an optional thing, but for me it adds a lot. So we'll start with this one first. It's also kind of the easiest of the two, because doing these, it's a little bit tricky. So we'll start with this. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our wire cutters, which I've got right here, and we are going to cut off this long leg, and we're going to cut it off. There's this little solder point, little nib, I guess. That's how we're going to cut it. So we're going to come in here and just cut it. Get rid of that. And now with our resistor back here, we're going to do same thing. We're going to go real short, probably about that much. Now you might be saying, why? Well, again, it'll make a little more sense when we're in here, but when I put this in, you kind of want the bulb to be about maybe halfway on this little square here. Any bigger and it just doesn't look right. It kind of, the light goes in the wrong places, and I mean, if you want to use this whole bit, you can, but I mean, if you do, if I shove it in here, there we go. Your light would be all the way out to the end of this, and it just wouldn't go in the right place. So that's why I make it real short. And now what we're going to do is we're going to solder this. Alright, so basically we're going to tin the iron here. And notice I have a fan on in the background. That's just to keep the smoke out of my face. And we're just going to, like I said, this is tricky to do, at least with one hand. Just going to shove it like that, and that's it. Alright, so now we're going to take our little LED and resistor, and I've actually made a couple more of them to put into the bulb slots. So we're just going to take this here and stick it in our little slots here. And what you're going to kind of do is, I kind of started it, you're going to bend the legs of both the resistor and the ground part of the LED, which sometimes does not want to go in. You'll find that that's sometimes a little bit trickier than it looks, but you're going to take it and put it in here, and then you're going to bend it to make the curve, and what you're going to end up with is something that looks kind of like this. And then on the bottom you're going to have the long leg, which is the resistor, and then you're going to have the ground leg. So what we're going to do is we're going to bend this down, and then we're going to take our pliers again, and we're going to just bend that up like that. So now we can solder these on. And what I like to do is to hold this better instead of using my finger. Is one thing that's optional is just put some tape over this. That way you don't have to hold it with your finger while you're messing with the soldering iron trying to solder these things. So just grab a bunch to kind of hold it, and then just stick the tape on there. And then now it's a whole lot easier to solder this because you don't have to hold it. You can just set the thing here and solder. Alright, so we're going to start, like I said, on the small leg, which is the negative lead. So take my soldering iron and my solder. I got some solder on here, but I found that you load it up, it's a lot better. This is kind of like doing through hole. Actually, it basically is doing through hole components, like on boards and things. Because that's basically what we're doing, more or less. And that right there is a nice joint. And then what we're going to do now to do the positive end is we don't need the tape anymore, because you just kind of need it just to hold it in place for the positive lead, so that way it doesn't start rolling around. Because as you can see, we got a nice secure connection now on this. So this you can just bend up with your finger and get it about as straight as you can. And we're going to do the same thing with this end again. You tin it, even if there's solder around there. Doesn't hurt to add some more. Yeah, see, it's hard to do this on the camera. Alright, so when you're all said and done, this is basically what you're going to have. You're going to have your long lead, which is again the resistor, and then you're going to have the negative ground lead. So we're going to take our wire cutters, and we're just going to trim off this excess material, because we don't need all that. And try to go as flush as you can, just because it's better. There we go. And that's basically our end. There we go. So there's our end, nice and tight, and this is a really good job, if I do say so myself. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get these bulbs out of here. Now the easiest way to do this is to put them up, because instead of putting them down, when you put them down and cut them, you're going to have to do it anyway, but it's a little bit easier when you bend it, because you're going to have to bend it with the pliers to bend it when it's straight up. It's just a little bit easier in my opinion. So we're going to come in here and we're going to go ahead and cut. Now you can go as long or as short as you want. I kind of went somewhere in the middle, but you can go to the very end of the bulb. You can, go to next to nothing if you want, however you want to do it, but your end result is to get this onto these leads. Alright, so now we got our pliers here, and I'm just going to kind of bend the leads out a little bit so that way you can solder them a little bit easier when it's time to solder. You go just easier, so something like that is perfect. Alright, so now with your LED, what you're going to want to do is you're going to kind of want to look and see how you're going to do it. Now, what I like to do is I like to place my leads on the outside of the connections. Why? Just what I like to do. And you're going to kind of want to position the lights so just like the other one, so the tip of the light is just past the halfway mark of this little square. It's just, again, the way I like to do it. If it's out here, the light's just not going to go in the right place. It's just going to look funky. So I like to go right about here, and then what I'll do is I'll come in with my cutters again, and I will find that connection and cut it there. And then what we'll do is we will go ahead and solder the leads onto the little posts here. So it's a little bit tricky. Once you do, 3 or 4 of these, it gets to be a little bit easier, but this first one's a little bit tricky. What I like to do is I like to tin the posts first, and then I tin the LED. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. I can tin it. Forgive my shaking here. It makes it quite easier if you do it, tin it like this, and then again you take your piece here, it's hard to do one hand, very hard to do one hand, but come in here and you just blab it on there like that. Alright, so I'll show you what we got here right now. So far we have an LED here, and then we have an LED here. Again, this one was added by me. It did not come from the factory. And this one here is a replacement of the bulb that was here. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the same process we just did for this LED and hook it up here. Now, again, this is why I said to take off that little housing, is because it's tight quarters, and I've partly burned one of them, and when I did that, I didn't want to go any further with it. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut our ends off, and then we're going to add the LED and resistor. So you just saw it, so I will do it, and we'll be right back. Alright, so that was fun, wasn't it? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and test it. So I've got my leads here. Let me set this thing onto ohms. So what should happen is when we test one of these, any one, doesn't really matter, they all should light up. If they don't, that means something's wrong. So put one lead here. Again, it's hard to do it one-handed. We got 1, 2, and 3. So we're good. Now, if one of them didn't light up, we have to check our solder joints, which you should always do anyway. But if one of them, like, let's say this one didn't light up, but these two did, we can just check our solder joints. Now, if one of them, if we check our solder joints and they're fine and it still doesn't light up, that's where the clips come into play, and I have a test track behind me here. And what I can do is just quickly unsolder these, put them on the clips, and if the light is dead, then I can just replace it with a new one. But that's the way you do it. So that's it for this board. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put it back in the car, and what I like to do is I like to fire it up just because, really for no other reason than that. Just fire it up and see how it looks, and you guys can kind of see the difference in the lighting here. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and throw the screws and the little connector back on, and we will fire it up. Alright, so we're back on the track, and here's our frame, and here's our shell. Now again, this side is converted, and this side is still our bulbs here. So as you can see, I got 1, 2, and nothing. And then over here we got 1, 2, 3 LED. So kind of like when we took this apart, you're going to kind of want to slide it in. It's a very tight fit in here. So it's going to click on this side, and then give it a little extra click here. And then when we turn on our power, I don't know how well you guys can tell in the video, but this side here is LEDs, and this side here is bulbs. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do the other side. Alright, so we're back to kind of square one again, I suppose. So here's our shell again, and now we're going to work with this side. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit different than this side because it's a bigger board, first of all, and we have a lot more stuff going on. This here is the panel for the switches. So in here is our switches. This is our PCB slot connector, and these wires here go to the gearboxes for the doors and also the switches, and then the small one is the lighting connector that goes to over here. Now, what I would recommend doing to get this out of here, I would recommend by disconnecting these connectors. Now some of them, like this lighting connector, you can just pull it out easily like that. These other ones, this one here is a little easy to get to. You can kind of get to it. It's a little challenging, but nevertheless you can sometimes get to it. However, if you need help, that's what the pliers are for. Now I've actually broken one of these connectors, so you pull the pliers and take the connector out. It's nothing I really have to show you. So I'm going to take these out and then we can undo these screws. Alright, so now we got our connectors undone, so now we're going to undo our screws. Now as far as screws, there's a few more. There's one here, there's one here, here, and then there's one back over here. So I'll go and remove those and then we'll get to work. Alright, so this board's a little bit easier to get out than the other one because you have more places to grab it. So, but basically we just pull it out here. And it's basically the same thing as the other one. Really when you get to this one, which I'll show you how to do, is it's a little bit more challenging. This one, and when you're doing this one, basically you just have to be kind of careful that you don't burn this with the soldering iron, but this one is the same thing as the other one. You want to probably remove this connector. These two are fine, but that one probably for sure. When we add this one, I'll show you how to do that. It's more or less the same thing as what we did over here, but you got to be careful because these switches, again, you don't want to burn these, and there's also a lot more traces on this board, so you got to be careful that you don't nick a trace, because that could be a potential nightmare too. But doing this and this is basically the same as before. Adding this one's a little bit more tricky, so I'll go ahead and do these. Again, basically same process, nothing really changed. So I'll add these and then I will show you how to add this one and then we'll be done. Alright, so we're basically starting the same as before. I've got this light here and this light here all done. And now we got this one. So it starts the same as previous. We got our prongs fit through the holes and we're going to bend it to make our shape. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. I mean, if anything, a little curve actually doesn't really hurt it because it would change where the light goes, which is kind of cool. So you can do almost whatever you want. And then we're going to bend the leg. Now, don't bend it this way. I mean, you can if you want. It doesn't hurt anything. But it's a little bit better to bend it this other way. And we're going to do the same thing with our tape. Again, you don't have to do this. I do it because it's a little bit easier. And we're going to take it and put it on our light. Give it make sure it's nice and tight on there. So now, when we do this, as you can see, your main issue is the fact you got to be really careful next to these switches. And actually, I got to take my pliers. I got to bend this leg. That way it's straighter. So when we solder, it's not going to be a big to-do. So let me zoom in. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're just basically just going to solder our connection here. That's all there is to it. And then this one, same kind of thing. Again, you just want to be careful with these switches. You don't want to burn them. So what we're going to do next, to do the other one, is we're just going to take our, actually just use your finger. You don't need the pliers. You pull it up, you take your tape off, if you're using that. And then, again, same thing, just solder it, and then cut the excess off with the cutters. And then that's it, we can test it. Alright, so I'm going to give it one more check. And then we'll be done after this. So we have light here. Now, sometimes when you do this, you may find that all three won't light up when you do a check, which sometimes happens. As you can see, this one I'm getting nothing even though I'm touching it. So in that instance, what I do is I have some test leads here, and we're going to clip one to here, and then my other one, which is for ground, and we're going to go and fire it up and see what we have. Alright, so let me get it all in the picture, and we'll go and fire it up. Now, as you can see, we only have 2 of our 3 lights, and sometimes when you do it, not all 3 will light up by themselves. And that's not a reflection of your wiring or anything. Sometimes it's just what happens, that they don't all get the connection sometimes, and you got to do them separately. So now we'll put it on this one, and now we'll light it up, and we have all 3. Now when you put it in the car, we should be all working and ready to go. Now if not, you can just check it, and these ones especially, you gotta be really careful with these solder joints, because sometimes they won't, you'll think they're on but they're really not, and you always want to just double check your joints and just be sure they're all flush and ready to go here. So what I'll do is we'll go ahead and put the connectors back in, and I'll do the same thing. I'll put 1 screw in, and we will test it just to be sure 100% works, and then we'll put these screws in, and then we will put the shell screws back on, and we'll be done with this project. Alright, so we'll do this for the last time here. So here's our shell. I got my 1 screw in. Now you'll notice I've kept those connectors unplugged. I just connected the lights one, and that is just in the event I need to take this off again, I won't have to worry about damaging those connectors or the wires. So alright, so what's wrong? Well, let's find out. Now, let's check our joints. This one looks fine. This one looks fine, but closer look. What's this? It's not connected. So let's fix that real quick. Alright, so I fixed that solder joint, and let's give it a check now. See what we have. I'm not sure how well you guys can see it, but we have light on all of them now. Now again, this here too, you can see it may look on, but you always want to check them just to be sure. And I did this semi-intentionally, just because, you know what, even when you test it, sometimes something may happen. You may either A, forget to test it, or if you do test it and you find something still doesn't light up. I have seen these where, when I was doing a few, that all 3 didn't light up, but when I put it on the track, all 3 lit up. So sometimes that does happen, and in this case I didn't get that lucky. It was a bad solder joint on this one. So now we're all done here, so we'll test it one more time, and then we'll button the car up. Alright, so here's our shell, and we're going to try this again now. Again, I just kept those 2 unplugged just in case. Again, sometimes this is tricky to get these on here. You just want to be careful with it. And there we go, we have them all. Now, again, you know, sometimes when you put it on the track, sometimes it'll work, and also I've seen sometimes when you test it, and it works fine. Sometimes when you put it on the track, a solder joint might come disconnected or something. So it happens, you know. It's not the end of the world if you do, you know, pull it apart. That's why I don't put put all the connectors back in and I don't screw the car back together until I know for a fact 100% it works. So that's just what we do. So I'll go ahead and put the car back together and we will be done. Alright, so one note before we look at the car we detailed today, and that is that if you were to do this, specifically when you convert to LEDs, what you'll find is if you leave the powered car stock, which currently it is, but I will convert it just like I've converted the rest of the cars, or at least 3 of the 6, but in the powered car there's a board that when you move the set, the lights get dim, as you see here, and these first 3 are the LED cars. As you can see, we got pretty much no lights, and it's just the way the cars are. The powered car does that, and if I get to a bulbed car, like you can see here, you can see we got the lights when it's sitting still, and then when you're moving, again, they get dim. And when I convert the powered car to LEDs, I will try to bypass that board and wire the lights directly to track power, so that way the dimming effect won't happen. So if that is successful, or even if it's a failure, I'll let you know. I'll update the video description here and let you know how that went. But anyways, let's take a look at the car we worked on today. Alright, so if we take a little look inside, you can see we got some figures hanging out here, and then if I roll it backwards, you can see we got some more figures hanging out there. So it looks really, really cool, and I am just really happy by the way this turned out here. So that's pretty much all I have for this project here, and I'll quickly do a run by of the set so you guys can see it in action. So that'll do it for this one, and you guys take care. We'll see you next time.
Next stop, West 8th Street.